What's going on? This is Marcus, and in today's video, we're going to do a few things. First, I want to talk about and go over in detail and provide the numbers for some individual investment goals that I started in 2021. Also, we're going to do an update as to the family emergency fund. So we'll talk about the numbers and the funding and the whole nine. If you're interested in following my debt-free journey and learning about finance, I definitely invite you to subscribe to the channel and definitely hit that like button because it'll help the channel grow. To all my returning subscribers, hey, I appreciate you, and for everybody who's viewing, thank you for tuning in, and definitely hit that subscribe button if you're interested in more content like this. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into the numbers. I keep looking over because I'm watching the Wizards game. Even though they suck, they won like 7 out of 8 or something like that. So now I'm kind of interested. But anyway, let's start out with the investments. So in 2021, I have my personal spending money every month, essentially $300 a month, $150 every 2 weeks. Again, because we're in Rona, I'm not traveling for work. I'm working from the crib. For the most part, I would just save a lot of that money or use it to pay for emergencies that came up, so I didn't have to delve into the emergency fund or potentially reduce the payments that we want to make towards debt. So I have done a few things because I wanted to put that money to use, not necessarily just save it, but wanted to invest in a few things. And this is also kind of where the debate came in as it relates to when you, as a husband or wife, invest your personal money, who's the benefits of the pros? When you, as a husband or wife, invest your personal money, who benefits from the proceeds? And I really know what the problem was. The problem was I actually invested some money in Bitcoin, and when it was booming 2 weeks ago, like an idiot, I was like, hey, take a look at this return that I made so far. And then that's how the whole topic came up. But it's really a non-issue. I think we resolved that. And if we didn't, I just never would bring it up again and just wouldn't even worry about it. So first, let's talk about investment accounts that I opened up in 2021. Now, before we get started, these are just kind of my side new investment accounts that I want to start. We actually contribute 10% of our income to retirement accounts. We do that every month like clockwork, and have been doing so for probably 15 to 16 years or something to that effect. But this is just things that I want to do with my personal money, and I'm also going to talk about how we're going to be using our credit card cash back rewards to fund some of these investments as well, so we can track it throughout the end of the year. So the first investment account that I have opened up was an Acorns account. Now, again, I hate to give out free advertisement, but the reason I selected an Acorns account was for 2 reasons. One, it's probably the most simple app that you can use to start investing. If you're not interested in actually picking individual stocks and researching companies and looking at charts, you can go with Acorn. And essentially what they do, which makes it so simple, is when you enter your information, they take your age and your expected retirement date. Then based on that date, they recommend a portfolio anywhere from aggressive to extremely conservative. They have some moderately aggressive, moderately conservative portfolios as well. But it really makes it simple. You don't have to select the stock. They invested in funds that a lot of people are familiar with, like VOO, which holds companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Tesla. So it's really simple to do, and you can kind of put it on autopilot. I've always been a fan of autopilot investments because I'm not a trader. Anything that I'm holding on to, presumably you can hold it from 5 years to a lifetime, and it'll probably work out for you. So I actually did start that. Now, to initially fund that, I used money, my personal money that I kind of had saved aside. Right now, I currently have $270. Right now, I have $270 in that investment account starting from January. The other thing that I like about the Acorns account is it gives me the ability to open up investment account for my kids with their where they're the actual, I'm the custodian, but they're actually listed on there. You have to input their social, and I was so proud too, because my son, he pretty good on the money game. My daughter, Not so much. But I was so excited when after she got paid this week from doing her chores. I said, hey, what do you want to use your money on? And she said, well, I'm just going to use $5 from my last paycheck to buy these stupid Roblox or Bloxburg or whatever stupid game she's playing now. Then she said, and the rest of the money, I'm just going to put it in the investment account. Just put it in the investment account. I was like, she made Dad proud, because sometimes I worry about her because she just likes to spend, or she likes to make me spend, one of the two. But that's essentially what's going on. There's $270 in that Acorns account. Currently, I have it set up to be funded at $100 a month. But I'll tell you, I may shift and adjust that depending on if things come up, or if I actually need to use those monies some other place. But right now, I'm looking at I have about $300 a month for my personal money, and if we talk about and we take into consideration what we get from our cash back rewards, it's going to be anywhere from $375 to $390, $400 a month. So $270 in the Acorn account. We currently have that set on autopilot at $100 a month, but I may adjust that based on how things are going. Okay, now the next investment vehicle that I've started was a portfolio for crypto. Now I tell you, I was actually somebody actually put me on the crypto early, but I was just kind of old school and archaic in my ways. I was like, I don't know about this whole crypto thing. I actually remember verbatim telling them about how rosebuds used to be a hot, expensive commodity, and everybody wanted to invest in rosebuds because they were brought over from overseas or something to that effect. I went through this whole story, and at the end of the day, in hindsight, I really missed the boat. I think it was probably around $7,000 or $8,000, but essentially I decided to jump into crypto. So I'll tell you right now, what I initially funded this crypto portfolio with was about $1,134. $1,000 of that was money that I had stashed away from last year from saving up my personal money, and then the $134 was a combination of some remaining money I had stashed, plus I took the $96 that we made in bonus rewards in the month of January and applied it to that, and that's how we got the $134. So how it's currently broken up based on what's in the portfolio right now: $954 is allocated to Bitcoin, $110 is allocated to Ethereum. The current value of the portfolio is $1,064. So far I've actually lost money. Now I tell you, and I do have some concerns with Ethereum and the price of gas, but that's a whole nother technical thing for a whole nother video. But I'll tell you, with Bitcoin and these digital type of currencies, with the exception of XRP, I think that's trash. But essentially with these cryptocurrencies and the ones I'm looking at investing and holding them for the long run. At one point, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I was probably up 40% on this portfolio. So I think about it, I had about $1,134 in it, and the portfolio was valued at about $1,500 and some change. But I already knew it was going to go down. Last week was brutal for the market and brutal for the cryptocurrency game, because, again, I won't go into specifics, but essentially a few weekends ago I saw an important figure in the federal government. They actually came out with an article kind of talking about how Bitcoin is unsustainable, and because of that, everybody got shook. People started to sell off some Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other forms of crypto, and then you kind of see the price dive down. But those are really going to be long holds for me. Now I'll tell you, Bitcoin is trading around $46,000 for one Bitcoin, so that is going to be just a kind of slow, continuous investment throughout the course of every month. But Ethereum right now, I think, is trading at about $1,400. So actually what my goal is, I want to at least see if I can continue to fund this portfolio and focus on Ethereum to actually purchase one full share of Ethereum. If I can purchase one full share of Ethereum, I think that'll put me in a great space. So that's essentially the goal. I'm probably going to focus a little bit harder on Ethereum than I am on Bitcoin currently. One, because I think Ethereum is in general a far more superior product, although Bitcoin does have the buzz right now. So that's what I'm currently doing in that crypto portfolio. I have $1,064. Majority of that was funded again from my personal savings account, and I'll tell you that the cashback rewards that we get monthly from my credit card, I will be using to fund this portfolio. So it'll be a mixture of my personal funds plus what we got from the cashback rewards. That way I could track it if the wifey get pressed and we actually got to split it up. No, I'm joking. It's all good. But that's really how that account is going to be funded. The next investment vehicle that I started in 2021 was an individual stock portfolio, actually using Webull. So again, I've seen a lot of people kind of talking about it, but as I was going through and just doing some research, I had an idea. There are three things that I want to focus on with building up this portfolio. The first thing that I want to focus on is dividend stocks. Even though they do have ETFs and other vehicles out there where you can use to get dividends, and I'll put a link above to a video where I went over stock market 101 and just some of the basics if you need to know all the lingo. But I wanted to get away from ETFs doing this and really focus on individual stocks. So the three things again that I'm going to focus on are going to be individual stocks. It's going to be an ETF that is focused on cannabis companies, because I think that has great long-term potential, considering our current president wants to decriminalize it and the vice president is in favor of legalization. So I think down the road that could be a very profitable. And then the third thing that I want to look at is what I like to call revitalization stocks. These are going to be stocks that kind of died during this pandemic, but that I expect in the next 8 to 24 months to be booming again. So this includes stocks like movie theaters, AMC stock. This includes, and I know a lot of people talk about this, not a Wall Street bets thing, but one of the benefits from when AMC stock had that large increase, what essentially happened was AMC was actually able to generate enough income to sustain themselves during another year, if need be, of potential restrictions on crowd gatherings due to the pandemic. But with all of these vaccinations being out, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, one-shot vaccine just being approved yesterday, I think that this will be a great opportunity to look at those, revitalization stocks. So I'm going to look at stocks that kind of fell off because of the pandemic, but are looking at bubbling back up. So that would include, again, AMC, Disney, Carnival Cruise stocks, Royal Caribbean stock. Those are going to be the categories that I'm going to fund. So with this, again, personal individual stock portfolio that I'm using at Webull, we're just looking at three things. We're looking at dividend stamp. We're looking at three things. We're looking at dividend paying stock. We're going to be looking at funding cannabis ETF, and then we're also going to look at revitalization stocks. That being those things that fell off during the pandemic, but once everything is over, you expect them to kind of rise back up. So currently what I have in that stock, my initial investment was $100. That was $100 of, again, money I used from my personal account to fund it during the month of January. What I'm currently holding, I have 2 shares of AT&T that I purchased at $29. I have 1 share of a stock, an ETF, cannabis ETF. The stock symbol is YOLO. You gotta love that name, but yeah, the stock symbol is YOLO. I purchased that 1 share for $27.21, and then the last share that I'm currently holding is 1 share of AMC that I purchased at $9.79. That's the movie theater. So that's where we are with that personal investment stock portfolio. So now that we kind of got those things out of the way, we're going to talk a little bit about emergency funds. Now, in a lot of videos I talked about, just kind of my views on emergency funds, but I never really went in depth. So first, let me lay out a little bit of my view on emergency funds. Now, I know a lot of people go with the hardcore Dave Ramsey $1,000 starter emergency fund. And I think that that could be sufficient if you have 12 months or less until you're debt free. $1,000 may be sufficient. You may be able to avoid some catastrophe or some emergency. However, most people are paying off debt for a significant period of time. A lot of times it's often more than 24 months. If that's the case, you don't want to leave yourself out here naked with only $1,000 in an emergency fund. I mean, I've talked about it in several videos. I've had job losses. I had medical things that came up. And again, I've never had a $1,000 limit. Even when something goes wrong with my car, it normally costs almost $1,000 or more than $1,000. So that's kind of why I never really was a proponent of the $1,000 emergency fund. So this is essentially kind of my view of the emergency fund. One, you should only have two types of savings accounts in the bank. One is to actually hold your emergency fund, and two, if you're saving for a purchase. You're saving, you have a sinking fund to purchase a car or go on vacation or even a down payment of a house. Anything like that you can have in the actual bank and the savings account. Anything above that should be invested because, hey, I'll put the link to the importance of time and money above, but you know, the time value of money is important, and if you leave it in a saving account, you'll definitely be losing because inflation occurs every year at about 3%. So what we do in my household with regard to our emergency fund is allotted a certain amount of money that's going to go there every month like clockwork. We don't have access to that account. So back in 2020, when I started this debt-free journey and I was making a lot of progress, the reason I was able to make a substantial amount of progress was in part because I really said, hey, I want to just have student loan debt to focus on in the beginning of 2021. So I depleted a vast majority of what we had in our emergency fund because I wanted to pay off the cars and the credit card and all that other nonsense that was kind of zapping our excess money to focus on student loans. And so what we do currently is we allocate $500 a month towards building an emergency fund. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. It's just $500 a month towards building that emergency fund. Now, these are just kind of the numbers on what we need for emergency fund. Initially, at the end of 2020, we had about $2,000 in our emergency fund currently. So that's where we were when we started the year. Okay, we contribute $500 per month. So far in 2021, we've actually saved $1,993. We're actually a little bit above pace, and the reason we get above pace is because sometimes when we don't overspend in certain categories, or for example, last month we got the escrow refund, we were able to put some additional money towards the emergency fund. So we're actually ahead of the pace on the emergency fund. Now currently in our emergency fund, we have an amount of $3,993, so we're making good progress. What our actual goal is for the emergency fund, well, our goal is we're only going to focus on having essentially 3 months of expenses. But we're probably going to push it up a little bit higher because when we do, or when we determine what we're going to have in our emergency fund, we essentially look at our budget and say, hey, if worst case scenario happened, what are all the essential things that we have to pay? I mean, if me and my wife both lost that job, we're not worried about my daughter going to dance. We're not worried about having Netflix and dining out and all of those stupid things. So when we broke down that budget to the bare bone minimums to survive and pay all of the essential obligations, we were looking at about $6,000 a month. So if we did 6,000 times 3, that'll give us $18,000 to fund our emergency fund. But I want to round up to a nice clean $20,000 to fund the emergency fund. So right now we're at $3,993 to move towards that emergency fund. Now I will tell you that we're in a little bit of a unique situation, and I'll tell you, once you start to pay off debt and reduce obligations you have to creditors, you have a little bit more flexibility. And here's what I mean by that. Well, one, my car drives a lot better now that it's paid for, but I'm actually going to get some work done on my car but it's actually preemptive work. I didn't get a check engine light, I didn't get a warning light. I just know that, hey, I need to change these brake pads on the car, so let me go ahead and do it. So one, when you aren't over leveraged and you don't have as many debts, you can actually preemptively plan for expenses that you need to take care of, that you know are coming down the pike. The other thing that we do is, if we have an emergency come up, this is pretty much our order of operation as to how we attack it. If, let's say, an unexpected expense came up of $1,000, well, the first thing that we would try to do is fund that emergency using our excess money that we have for spending at the end of the month. So if I got $300, my wife got $400, at the end of the month, if we had a $1,000 emergency, we're going to take that $700 and that's going to go towards that emergency. That's step one. If an emergency pops up, we're going to see if we can address it using our discretionary money. Step number two, what we'll do if an emergency pops up, if we can't address all of it using our discretionary money, the next step that we'll take is we'll reduce the amount of debt that we're going to pay off for that month to actually address that emergency, and then next month we'll just resume and pick up where we left off. So what that really does is, one, it allows us an opportunity to build up our emergency fund. Even when emergencies come up, we're not really necessarily taken away from it. We're just finding a way to address that cost through other vehicles in the budget. Now, I will tell you, as it relates to paying off debt, if we're actually close to paying off a debt and we're at the finish line, then and only then will we consider depleting the emergency fund to actually pay off that debt. But we only do that when we're really within striking distance of paying off a debt. So let's say a year and a half from now, I only have $5,000 or $10,000 remaining on my student loan, but I have $20,000 in my emergency fund. In that example, I would take $10,000 out of my emergency fund, go ahead and knock out and pay off that debt, because I'm really close to the finish line. But what we also take into consideration when we do that, when we do decide to go that route, what we also take into consideration is we try not to deplete our emergency fund more than 50% if we don't have to, only as it applies to paying off debt. Now, if it was an emergency like we needed to replace the roof and we had to use all of that emergency fund to do it, we're just going to use all that emergency fund to replace the roof. But if it's a situation where I'm close to the finish line to pay off this debt and I want to get across the finish line and I don't want to wait 5 more months to do it, in that instance, we already kind of came up with the rule that, hey, we can deplete our emergency fund 50% of it to get us across the finish line, so long as that 50% of the emergency fund will completely wipe out that debt, and then we just continue to go to fund that emergency fund. Because remember, we're always going to have $500, $500, $500 going to that emergency fund account no matter what. Now, down the road, when this emergency fund is fully funded with $20,000, that $500 will likely just get rolled into any additional debt payment. So we would just increase the amount of money that we apply towards debt at the end of the month by $500 once that emergency fund is fully funded. So that's kind of our approach. That's kind of where we are. That's pretty much it. I appreciate you all tuning in. Y'all take care. Be blessed. Peace.